This is how to make a warm espresso butterscotch self-saucing sponge pudding and rum raisin gelato. This is a barista made espresso sponge pudding because 30 milliliters of the best quality espresso coffee will make the best tasting pudding. The espresso is poured on top of the pudding and is slowly steam roasted to create an espresso butterscotch sauce on the bottom of the jar. The puddings come out of the oven bubbling with a marbled appearance and coffee aroma that is very appetizing. When the sponge pudding is released from the jar, the sauce spreads out onto the plate, and the freshly made rum raisin gelato that's placed on top cascades into the warm espresso pudding, creating a dramatic presentation for anyone watching. The caramelized earthy flavors of the pudding and the sauce melt together with the creamy rum raisin custard for a unique coffee treat. Best served warm. Einkorn is an ancient grain that has grown close to where I live. Fieldstone Farms produces a variety of non-GMO grains. The wheat berries stay fresher longer whole, so being able to buy local and fresh grains is a real treat for someone that likes artisan baked goods. When wheat is ground, the flour is more perishable, so I grind flour in small batches. Einkorn has a toasty, nutty flavor, and stone grinding the wheat helps to capture the grain's natural flavor in baked goods. Highly processed flours can be very boring and can be a lot less nutritious. I sift the flour with the number 60 sieve, which does not create an ultra-fine processed powder, but more of a denser, full-flavored whole wheat flour instead. The bran that does not go through the sieve can be reground finer, but I like to use it in recipes that call for bran flour or gram flour. To make espresso butterscotch self-saucing sponge pudding, scale 60 grams of stone ground whole wheat einkorn flour and a pinch of Himalayan salt, and set the jar aside. For the wet ingredients, scale 30 grams of brown sugar and 30 grams of room temperature butter into a mixing bowl and cream them together. Mix in 60 grams of high-fat cream, 5 milliliters of vanilla extract, and a whole egg until well combined. Fold in the flour until combined. Place 3 125 milliliter mason jars in a high-sided frying pan and divide the batter between the jars. Mix 15 grams of brown sugar with 15 grams of room temperature butter and place a small dollop on top of the pudding to melt into the batter and help to create a sauce at the bottom of the jar and a soft textured pudding when it cooks. Pour a 30 milliliter shot of espresso over top of the butter batter, one pudding at a time. Move the jar slowly to distribute the coffee around and place the puddings in a high-sided frying pan. Pour boiling water into the pan to come about 30 millimeters or about an inch up the sides of the jar. The butter and coffee falls to the bottom of the jar to create the sauce as the pudding steam roasts slowly in a 325 degree Fahrenheit oven for 40 minutes. Transfer the puddings to a wire rack until cool enough to handle, about 20 minutes. The puddings are done when the center is cooked and the top is domed up and cracking. To help unmold the pudding, use a small peeling knife to drag along the outside of the pudding's edge. This will allow air to get into the jar and down to the bottom of the glass and help push the sauce to the surface along the edges. If the pudding is too warm to handle, hold the bottom of the jar with a towel. Turn the jar upside down and let the pudding fall onto the plate. Remove the jar and add a scoop of rum raisin gelato. Take the jar of gelato out of the freezer about 15 minutes before you want to consume it, so it melts into the pudding like a cream frosting. Rum Raisin Ice Cream is one of my favorites. That's the flavor I picked at the supermarket when I was a kid, but homemade versions are a lot better. The real rum flavor comes from a really good quality rum, but the alcohol itself needs to be in the right amount or the gelato will freeze very slowly and become icy because alcohol needs very cold temperatures to freeze. So we need to evaporate the alcohol as much as we can without losing the rum flavor. The best way is to scale 50 grams of organic raisins with 50 grams of good quality rum and 50 grams of brown sugar together in a small jar. They need to macerate together for 24 hours on the counter without a lid. This allows some of the alcohol to evaporate, but it also softens the texture of the raisins and stops the raisins from turning into frozen little rocks. To evaporate more of the alcohol, add the mixture to a saucepan and bring to a boil with 100 grams of high-fat cream. Scale 250 grams of whole milk and set the jar aside. Separate 2 eggs and place the yolks in a mixing bowl and place the bowl on top of a towel. To hold the bowl steady as you temper the eggs. When the cream boils for a minute or so, add the milk to cool down a bit before mixing in the eggs. Tempering the eggs with cream too hot will risk scrambling the eggs. Since we are cooking the raisin garnish into the custard, we can't filter the custard to remove any bits of scrambled eggs, so temperature control is very important. Use a Ziploc freezer bag to cook the gelato custard in. Drape the freezer bag on the inside of a wide-mouthed mason jar and use a jar filling funnel to make it easier to pour the custard and fill the bag. Get as much air out of the bag as you can and seal the bag tightly. Cook the custard sous vide style using a water bath heated to 85 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. An immersion circulator is a pump style heater that circulates the water as it heats it to an exact temperature for long periods of time and is an essential tool for successful sous vide cooking. Drape the end of the bag over the edge of the water bath and hold it in place with a plastic clip. The water bath I use is a 8-liter hard plastic Cambro storage container with a lid. I cut a hole in the lid to fit around an immersion circulator and like to use the 8-liter Cambro because it has handles, making it easy to carry or slide around on my counter even when it is hot. Transfer the cooked custard to an ice bath to cool down completely and store in the refrigerator overnight to allow the flavors to develop together. Freezing custards as soon as they are cooked can sometimes make them bland. Chill down the bowl of an ice cream machine, and when the bowl looks frosty, turn on the paddles and add the custard. The gelato is ready when it is coming away from the sides of the bowl and looks like soft serve ice cream. Pack the ice cream into 125 milliliter mason jars. I like smaller calorie counted portions, so the small mason jars makes it harder for me to cheat on my diet. The small individual sized portions also makes it easier to control the gelato serving temperature. Gelato tastes best as it is melting, so if it is not eaten at the right soft stage consistency of about -4 degrees Celsius, the gelato will need to be hard frozen quickly or the gelato will become icy. As the gelato is taken in and out of the freezer, the custard melts and when refrozen turns into ice, so tightly fasten the lids on the small portion sized jars so air can't get in and place the jars in the freezer to harden.